Hi VC, it's Aaron, Methalamer. Today I am doing a response to my great friend JC from the flip side, and he did a thread start that was your intro into like what we call hair metal. And there's a reason a lot of people don't like that term. It's a derogatory term made up later on about that genre of music, which is really a bunch of genres of music combined into one. And it started with, as a derogatory term by people that didn't like it and were just like lumped it into one thing. And then that spread to other like metal elitists, people that only like really heavy metal, like thrash. They would start using it, and it became like a punching bag for all these bands, which I've always really disliked. And it really kind of got its start. I mean, a lot of people were like that, but Beavis and Butthead really brought it to the foreground when they started making fun of some of these bands. And two bands in particular really suffered from this, and that was Crocus, who's a great band, and Winger, who's a great band. And they made fun of them, and then everyone started piling on, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And that's maybe the main reason I don't like the song Nothing Else Matters from Metallica. You got Lars in there throwing darts, and he's got a picture of Kip Winger on his dartboard, and that was, that, and, it's just like piling on. I don't really like that. I like all these bands. I like all the heavy bands. I like, of course there's a few bands in this genre I don't care for, which is with any genre. But for the most part, this is the music I grew up with and my favorite style of music, although there are so many different styles in this genre. It's not just one, little thing. That's what I'm going to kind of show here. And, what really got it rolling was two albums, and they were these here, Quiet Riot with Metal Health and Def Leppard with Pyromania. They came out fairly close to each other in time, and they both had videos on MTV that were shown a lot, and they just had that, that first, the spandex look, and there they are. And the thing about hair bands, I don't even know why they came up with that, because even the thrash bands all had long hair, but it kind of snowballed into a big thing where it was, the hair bands were doing that for effect, like a rock star thing, to be larger than life. They'd put on makeup or, costumes, which bands have been doing for years. And, start with, Alice Cooper and Kiss in the 70s and, amongst others. And, it was more of a larger than life thing. And and then the record companies really started to push the bands to do it more and more. They'd always try to push the bands to do what was popular at the time. And it changed after a while. You'll see what I'm talking about. And then, those two albums, Def Leppard and Quiet Riot, really got a lot of people into the heavier side of music, which got them into the heavier stuff like Metallica as well, because it just it was like a gateway albums for a lot of people that were just into regular rock, and then they became really loving the really heavy stuff too, which, those heavier bands, instead of putting them down, they should thank them for that, because a lot of their fans wouldn't be there if it wasn't for these early, as you would call it, like hair metal, as they call it now. So, and then of course we had other bands that were coming up, like Twisted Sister, and they were more of a shock rock, in the Alice Cooper tradition, Kiss tradition with their makeup. It wasn't just look like girls and stuff. It was more a shock thing. And then they also had the street side. They've always, a lot of these bands always had a street look too to go along with that. And it was for the stage presentation, and it was made them larger than life. You go see them live and you thought, oh wow, this is like really cool. And then, a lot of that was taken away when people started just dressing in jeans and t-shirts, which is great. I love that too. But it took the rock star element out of music, a lot of it. And I really miss that. And then of course you had bands like Wasp that were coming in that were, they're kind of a heavy metal, and lean to both directions with their, they're a heavier sound, but they also have some of those elements. They're more of a shock rock as well. And then bands like, of course, Rat were coming up, a big LA scene. And there's Rat, of course, Lay It Down has one of the best guitar riffs of all time. That's from this album. And, you had stuff like Motley Crue, who were constantly changing their looks. This is more of a shock rock era here. Then they went real glam. And this album here was another one that really changed the the way it was perceived made it huge, and then it kind of exploded after this album came out, Slippery When Wet from Bon Jovi. And Bon Jovi they're a hard rock, they're metal at times, but they what they did is they incorporated a lot of the keyboards into it too. And a lot of that sound I don't care for. I like how Bon Jovi does it and a few other bands, but then a lot of bands went overboard with that, with the keyboard sound, and that kind of wimped it out a little bit. There's still some good ones. That's probably my least favorite of the artists like that, are the ones that did that. And then, you had stuff like, this is another band that started about then. This is Autograph, and they had a very big keyboard sound as well, but they were really good rocking, but they never really hit it as big. And I think the keyboards might have had something to do with that. I mean, keyboards are good, but they were using them, and it sounds more dated in that way. And then, after Bon Jovi hit, there was a big metal scene in Philadelphia, and this band came along, Cinderella, who's really a bluesy metal band, but they were, that's the exact definition of what people call hair metal, even though these guys are really bluesy and heavy. And at that same time, this band was coming up, Brittany Fox. They were kind of competing in Philadelphia at the same time, coming up at the same time. Cinderella broke first, but they have a similar sound, and they're both excellent bands. I love both of them. Brittany Fox, I might like a little better. I don't know. I like them both a lot. And then you had a lot of great bands coming up like Black and Blue, who had 4 great albums, and they're just essential for this genre of music. Love Black and Blue. And then, stuff like Great White with, this is one that very accessible album they did. They started out really heavy with their first album, and then just kept going and got more popular and popular. Once Bitten was very popular with Rock Me. And then Twice Shy came out, and this blew up. They blew up after this one with, of course, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, and A House of Broken Love. Stuff like that on here. Really great album. And then the cool thing is, during this time, all those bands were going, and a lot of the older bands started to jump on and kind of were lumped into it, like stuff like Scorpions, who've been around since the early 70s, and then they started getting that same look and that same kind of sound to their music with this album here, Love for a Sting. Even had some of the heavier bands like Judas Priest doing it with Turbo, which is a very polarizing album. I love this album, but a lot of people don't like it because it leaned towards the glam metal sound, which is more of a sound and a look combined. It's a little more slick than the mainstream heavy metal. It's just all in your face. They had more hooks, more catchiness to their songs usually. And then bands like Crocus, which were very, very good band. Love Crocus, and it's too bad that they got that bad exposure, because they were just one of the best bands going. And then you had people like A Fast Way that were putting out great stuff like this Trick or Treat soundtrack, which is an amazing record. And even like Aerosmith was going in that direction with Permanent Vacation, a little more slick than the raw sound they had in the 70s. And Whitesnake, and going less bluesy and more not power metal, but more of the glam metal route with this. This is one of the best records ever made. Still has that bluesy influence. John Sykes is great on it. And then this album, I could have shown a few albums by this band. There's one up here, Asylum, but Kiss is one of those bands that kind of just kept morphing. And I think this one would be a really good one as an intro to Kiss, because it has all their 80s stuff that was real popular, most of it. Their glam metal era, which was actually their heaviest era. It's got the 2 songs from here, Let's Put the X in Sex, You Make Me Rock Hard, but it's also got stuff like Lick It Up, Heaven's on Fire, Tears Are Falling, and then if you don't know Kiss, a bunch of their 70s stuff too. So this is a great intro album to Kiss here. And then what happened is, after, like all things, it starts getting popular, then more extreme things happen. And when Poison came out with this record, they went to a totally glam, looking like girls look. And then that kind of culminated, it went in, a few bands did that, and this band really took it to the extreme. Pretty Boy Floyd. I love this record. I think it's great. It's like Motley Crue and Poison kind of mixed. That's what I'd call it sounding-wise. Really good record. And then you had, Warrant coming up. Great album here. Any of these records that I'm showing, I would recommend to someone getting into this, but there's all these different styles. And then you had stuff like Keel, which is a kind of a lesser known but great band with Ron Keel on the vocals. Mark Ferrari, a great guitarist. So Keel's a really great band in this genre. And then this British band here, they're just called the Choir Boys, but it's the London Choir Boys. They're more of a bluesy hard rock, almost a Rolling Stones sound. Say, picture the Rolling Stones mixed with Rod Stewart, but with a heavier edge. That's the London Choir Boys. Excellent record there. And then bands like Slaughter were coming up with Mark Slaughter, the amazing vocalist. And then, you know, you got Bullet Boys, another great band. I love all their albums. And then Winger, the one that was doomed by Beavis and Butthead. Great musicians. I mean, there was members of this band from the Dixie Dregs, which is a you know, instrumental jazz fusion band. So I mean, they're great musicians. Kip Winger played with Alice Cooper for a while. Just they're just so misaligned. I really is bad. And then you had the Guitar Virtuoso bands. And one of them, there's Vinnie Vincent Invasion. This is a guitar shredding masterpiece here. But look at there's the look, but the look doesn't really matter. That was all a stage presence and stuff like that. And back then, it wasn't weird. Now you look back, just like anything, you look back in hindsight and everything's a little weird. And you had other guitar virtuosos putting out albums like Mossy, and he's Alex Mossy, great guitarist. There's the band there. And then, of course, the amazing George Lynch with Dokken, just one of the most killer guitarists in the history of music. He's just amazing. And Dokken had some of the most, some of the best of this genre records with Back for the Attack and that, Tooth and Nail, just amazing records. And then the amazing Vito Bratta and White Lion. And White Lion is one of those, it's a guitar virtuoso band, but people just know the singles, but he is just an amazing guitarist. And James Lomenzo, the bass player, has played on some Megadeth records. Love White Lion. And then you can't forget about the female-fronted bands from this genre either. I'll start off with Lita Ford. She put out some great albums. This is a really good one. Of course, it has Close My Eyes Forever with Ozzy on this. And even Ozzy was getting into the glam thing for a while during Ultimate Sin and Bark of the Moon, No Rush for the Wicked, that era. And, of course, Kiss Me Deadly's on there. And then you had bands like this Sleaze Metal band with Sally Cato as a singer of Smash Gladys. Another great female-fronted band from this era. That's probably my favorite one. And then stuff like Femme Fatale, another really good one. This is more of the pop metal, the Femme Fatale. Not quite as good as the others. Have a little keyboardish stuff at times. And then this is a more bluesy one with a female-fronted band, Princess Pang. Really good band here. Love them. And in that same area, you can't forget the Japanese metal bands that were coming up. You had Loudness, who had a string of really great albums. And they were just a rockin' band. Love Loudness. And of course, EZO, that kind of took the Kiss approach with the makeup. And they're a very underrated band. I actually like EZO. It's my favorite Japanese metal band. And then this hybrid of Japanese and American metal, Cats and Boots, one of my all-time favorite records. Just an amazing record. Her Monkey, one of my favorite songs from that era. Love it. And then at the same time, you got more of the street style of metal. So it's like the street glam. They start out glam with makeup, hairspray, but Guns N' Roses, even they started out like that. And then they kind of mellowed out, went to the street kind of looking thing. And then you got LA Guns, same vein. I actually like LA Guns a little better. Amazing record there, amazing band. And then there was a little niche that was like kind of an AC/DC-ish glam metal, like Dirty Looks, which is an all-time favorite of mine. Absolutely love this. And then Rhino Bucket is in that same vein. This is a very unknown band that's really good. If you like AC/DC with a little bit of a sleazy edge, it's Rhino Bucket. And this is just an amazing record. Love it. And then Sea Hags is kind of in that same vein too, if you're leaning towards that style. And then, of course, you had Skid Row, who went from the regular hair metal sound, as you would call it, to the little heavier edge, and then they went even heavier with their next record, and this one changed it again, this Slave to the Grind, because it showed that the bands started getting heavier again after this album, which is really cool. And you had, of course, Dangerous Toys that were kind of doing their own Texas metal thing, really killer band there. And then there's some more experimental bands that were in that vein, but they they had their own thing, kind of experimental, like Queensryche here with Rage for Order. And there's, see, they were right in there with that look and everything, kind of a more gothic and just a little bit different sounding. And then this experimental band here, Lord Tracy, who is Terry Glaze, that was a singer from Pantera originally, but this album here has like every different genre of metal you can think on it. It's just an amazing record. And then Lost Boys, another one that's just totally unique and experimental. Great album. And then you get the Love Hate, another totally different band. There would be like, I mean, they're just, all these bands are so different. They don't sound alike, and that's what I'm showing here is these type. And then Saigon Kick, of course. They had their own thing going as well. Great band from Florida. And then we get into like the Sleaze Metal, which is my favorite. And really starting that off was Faster Pussycat is one of the best and one of the first. And then you had the Shock Rockers that were kind of in that same vein, Slave Raider. And then of course you get into the 90s, and they started getting heavier and really good guitar work with dual guitars and like stuff like Rockskin. The Sleaze Metal, where it was in the heavier vein, was where I'm at now, along with Sleaze Bees, another really great one. This is a great band. You should check them out. And then the heaviest of all of them, Spread Eagle. They're like Guns N' Roses mixed with, you know, just a little heavier than Guns N' Roses at times. But then they got that catchy glam metal sound mixed in with it. Really raw. Love them. And you can't leave this band out. Vane, one of the very best albums of that whole era with No Respect. And there they are. And Davey Vane actually produced the first 2 Death Angel records, the singer. And then you had the bluesier side that was coming up in the 90s, like Tesla. They were the ones that kind of started that bluesier edge of this genre. And Tesla just had some, you know, 3 amazing albums in a row, 4 actually, that were just amazingly great. And then my favorite of the whole genre, Sweetfa, where they were kind of a hybrid of the bluesy metal and the pop metal and the street metal. And there was, you know, they were, you know, they call them hair metal, but they never really wore makeup. They were more of the street side of it. And then for the other bluesy ones that were really good at that time was Tora Tora. You know, listen to the song Walking Shoes. It's really bluesy, amazing record here. And then the bluesiest maybe of them all is the Four Horsemen with Nobody Said It Was Easy. Just such an amazing record. But the cool thing about this is there's still bands that are, you know, putting out this style of music, and they're really good. And stuff like, in the last few years, we've had this Canadian band, Diamonds, and they kind of took this and put it into the 2010s. And it's an excellent record. If you like any of those, you would like this. It's really good. Maybe a little heavier at times, but then a little mellower at times. Great vocals, just great guitar. And then also the other band that's really keeping it alive these days is Leather Duchess. And their new album just came out. This is their first album. Really great. I mean, it's like it's like those 2 bands could have been back in those late 80s, early 90s. I would recommend either of those. Any of these albums I showed or any of these bands, check them out. If you don't know them, any of these, take a chance on any, and you'll like 1 or 2, and then it'll snowball. So I would like to thank JC, Josh. This was a great thread you did. Amazing. And everyone, I'll see you later. Have a good one.